Hello there, logheads. You're welcome as always back to the backlog. Just to get some niceties out of the way to start with, there's obviously going to be bantha-sized spoilers for Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor and for Andor in this video. For my money, these three are probably the best Star Wars outings outside of the movies ever, and Yusa should take the time to enjoy them. The script then says here that Desa bombard Star Wars. I don't think we should start the video like that. Since the original film released in May of 1977, Star Wars has been a franchise that's infatuated with hope and with the romance of rebellion. The first film was rechristened A New Hope 4 years after its original release, and that first trilogy returns to hope over and over. Hope for a better future, hope that the worst of us aren't beyond saving. Hope that fascism can be cast down and that freedom can reign in its place. The prequel trilogy that came after went on to subvert a lot about the originals. It dispenses with the slavish commitment to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and it revolves around how hope, democracy and freedom die in the mouths of politicians, how they're trampled under the feet of marching soldiers, and how they're ultimately reborn again in new generations. Star Wars as a franchise has faith in the immortality and the inevitable rebirth of hope, even when things seem to be at their darkest. As I've discussed on the channel previously, Jedi Fallen Order follows in this trend by guiding its damaged and traumatized characters along a path to finding hope once again, finding family and purpose. That game neatly closes out its story on a high, after giving Cal and the crew of the Mantis something to fight for. In a lot of ways, Fallen Order was very tightly bound to the animated Clone Wars TV show. Cal grew up during and was shaped by that titular war. His conception of what a Jedi was supposed to be was indelibly tied to fighting and to being a warrior. He visits locations that originated in the show, and his friends are similarly shaped by the events that it covers. Merrin, for example, is the last survivor of the massacre of Dathomir, an event that originated in the Clone Wars. Before it released, I kind of figured that Jedi Survivor would probably align in a similar way to the Rebels cartoon, given the overlapping time periods and the similar motifs of Jedi in hiding, found family, and guerrilla war against an empire at the height of its powers. It felt like it might rhyme, like poetry or something. I couldn't have been more wrong though. You see, Rebels was a more swashbuckling show than the Clone Wars. It was more light-hearted and adventurous for the most part. Now don't get me wrong, it definitely had its darker moments and it really knew how to lean into its emotional beats, but broadly, Star Wars Rebels is a pretty good time. By contrast, Jedi Survivor is emotionally quite bleak. Cal is exhausted after spending 5 years fruitlessly trying to dismantle the Empire's titanic infrastructure. I think a less audacious game would have made that 5-year struggle its plot, picked directly up where Fallen Order left off and tied into Rebels more tightly, but Respawn decided not to do that. So if Jedi Survivor's thematic twin can no longer be found in animation, then where is it? Where does Jedi Survivor fit into the broader Star Wars canon? And what does it have to say about the franchise's thematic fascination with hope? Months after I rolled credits on Survivor, I found myself rewatching the superb Disney Plus show Andor, and I pretty swiftly got answers to all of those questions. Andor, like Jedi Survivor, is concerned with what it takes on a personal level to fight an empire at the height of its influence. What drives someone to resist when things seem most hopeless? Ultimately, both Jedi Survivor and Andor revolve around a single question. What is the cost of hope? When we rejoin Cal at the start of Jedi Survivor, he's on an intel gathering mission on Coruscant. We're reintroduced to him at sunset, which is a time of change, a time of encroaching darkness. I think this does an excellent job at setting the tone right from the outset, and it foreshadows the game's thematic departure from Fallen Order. That game began at night, with Cal escaping Bracca's monolithic towers of scrap for the verdant and whimsically scored Bogano. Jedi Survivor, on the other hand, is a descent into darkness from the word go. Cal is consumed by Coruscant, he's swallowed by the Imperial machine. It's clear from the very beginning of the game that Cal is also in a much darker place than he was when we last saw him. He looks awful, with dark rings around his eyes and a kind of hardness in the set of his jaw that I think instantly communicates exhaustion and burnout.
Let me look at you. You look terrible.
He's on a mission to extract valuable information that he hopes will show him a glimpse of the finish line, give him an idea of the impact he's made through his 5 years of struggle. Instead, it clearly illustrates how utterly fucked he is. For half a decade, Cal has given up everything, everyone that he cares about, to bring the fight directly to the Empire, and he hasn't even made a dent. His found family have scattered, his new companions are soldiers and spies just as hardened as he is. There's no softness left in Cal here, which is evident in the ruthless way that he deals with the Imperial Senator that he's come to steal from, as well as with the ninth sister of the Imperial Inquisition, Masana Tide. Tide was one of Cal's primary antagonists in the previous game, and overcoming her there was a real moment of triumph in the story. Here she's relegated to being a tutorial boss, and Cal gives her only the most cursory warning before cutting her down. This again kind of contrasts with Fallen Order, where the second sister, that game's tutorial boss, completely outclasses Cal. He's a hardened fighter now, he's more than a match for a previously insurmountable foe. When he overcame Masana Tide the first time, he was shocked, he was taken aback by his victory. This time, the win feels hollow by contrast. The game is telling us that Cal has been diminished by years of combat, that some part of himself has been lost to the fighting. Jedi Survivor is showing us here what fighting the Empire has done to Cal. He's in the early days of Revolution, before the capital or rebellion was even formalized. There's no Luke Skywalker, no Millennium Falcon, no icons or heroes, it's just him. Him and his manic, obsessive devotion to the fight. That obsession actually winds up being a central theme of Jedi Survivor, the same way that trauma was in the original. In Fallen Order, each character had to overcome some sort of personal, emotional injury by the end of the story. Similarly, in Jedi Survivor, the theme of obsession is also explored through the characters and their relationship to the hidden planet of Tanalorr, which is said to be unreachable by the Empire. Tanalorr is many things to many people. It's a staging ground for revolution in Cal's eyes, a base for a resurgent Jedi Order to Dagan Gera, Cal's foil. Cal's newest ally, Boda Kuna, sees Tanalorr as a safe place to hide his daughter, somewhere that she might grow up outside of the Empire's shadow. Jedi Survivor draws on the High Republic setting, where Jedi Knights were more like the noble knights of Arthurian legend, and Tanalorr is symbolically a kind of holy grail, an unattainable ideal, an object of legend to be quested for. I think even the name does a good job at evoking the Arthurian and the mysterious and the mythical. Tanalorr isn't magic though, it isn't a quick solution to everyone's problems. It's a poisoned chalice, not a holy grail. A corrupting influence that exposes obsession in those who pursue it. That obsession is what makes Cal so effective at fighting the Empire. There's no corner that he can't will his way out of, no problem that he can't overcome. But it's also his undoing. He doesn't sense Bode's coming betrayal because he's so focused on pursuing Tanalorr. It's only after he loses his second master, Sir Junda, that he realises that Tanalorr should be used as a sanctuary, a place of safety and community, instead of as a military base. Cal's dedication to the fight almost seems to make him forget that he's just a little guy, you know? It's like he's come to see himself the way that the Empire does, as a symbol, an ideal, and a survivor first and foremost. Cal exists only as a wanted poster, even to himself, and Jedi Survivor draws attention to the inherent tragedy of that. The depersonalization of being a rebel first and a human being second. Now you might be hearing this and you might be thinking, Mr. Log, Cal doesn't really sound like Cassian Andor at all. And I think you'd be correct in saying that. That's fair. Cassian is very much an unwilling rebel for a lot of Andor, although I think the idealistic manifesto written by Nemec definitely does get its claws in him by the end of the first season. and he does play a big part in radicalising his peers while in prison. Andor is set 4 years after Jedi Survivor, and we see that the whole Empire situation is pretty much the same, if not worse. The seeds of an organised resistance are being planted, but that process is costly and dangerous, for nobody more so than Stellan Skarsgård's Luthen Rael. Luthen is a high society antiquities dealer on Coruscant by day, but he moonlights as an insurgent, a spy master and a saboteur. Like in Jedi Survivor, obsession winds up being a huge theme for Andor, with lots of characters that willingly sacrifice love, family, honour, just to do what they feel is necessary. Varada Sethu's Cinta, Skarsgård's Rael, Denise Goff's Dead Ramiro, and Kyle Soller's wonderfully petulant Cyril Karn are all driven by this personally unhealthy commitment to a cause. They all lose something of themselves to their obsession. You know, Cyril is laid off from his job. Cinta lets her relationship fall by the wayside. Dedra is so focused on uncovering the infrastructure of rebellion, so focused on the theory of rebellion, that she's completely unprepared for its violent reality. Luthen has murdered his life to build that rebellion. Andor is also fascinated by the prep work and the pain that enable grand gestures of rebellion like Luke's heroic trench run. I feel like if Andor crossed over with Star Wars Episode 4, it would be about the pilots who get blown up while Luke is being a hero, if that makes sense. Characters like Luthen sweat and struggle in the shadows, so that heroes can emerge to end the fights that they start. Like Luthen says in this fantastic monologue, he burns his life to make a sunrise that he'll never see.
So what do I sacrifice?
The truly spectacular heist arc in Andor is fully 2/3 focused on this process, on the minutiae of training and planning necessary to make a grand revolutionary gesture happen. We're with this handful of scruffy men and women as they train in the cold and the muck, pacing through wooden replicas of the high-tech Imperial base that they plan to rob. The show pays this off by showing us the flip side, Luthen's ecstatic reaction to the news once word reaches him the following morning. Andor shows us the news of the rebellion, but it also shows us what it takes to buy these moments of hope. The same is also true of the prison arc, where the physicality of training and preparing on Aldhani is replaced by the arduous process of political activation. The first 2/3 of the prison arc revolve around Cassian and his companion Melshi radicalising Andy Serkis's Kino Loy, the prisoner cum warden in charge of their cell block. Kino's speech at the end of Andor's prison arc is genuinely brilliant, and a career high point for Andy Serkis, in my opinion. It also relies completely on the audience's implicit understanding of the weight of his political activation. It's impactful because we saw Kino's commitment to serving out his sentence, and then saw his growing disillusionment with that confinement, as Cassian and Melshi revealed the depths of the Imperial deceit to him. Like Luthen hearing the news about Aldhani, we as the audience get to enjoy the catharsis of escape, get to revel in the ways that Kino leverages his position as a figure of authority to inspire revolutionary action, but we also get to see that there's two sides to these grand gestures. There's the blood and the sacrifice that goes into enacting them, Seer, Nemik, Gorn, Cassian and Melshi radicalising their peers. And then there are the sensationalised reports that ripple out into the public consciousness. While Andor is much more concerned with this process than Survivor is, it's not all that hard to imagine the legends of Jedi fugitives disappearing to an unfindable planet, with sacrifices like Seer's remaining personal to those that knew them, the bloody cost of inspiration. Jedi Survivor and Andor both tell us that rebellions in Star Wars are built on sacrifice. They show us the darker side of the legends that spark hope. In a cool kind of inversion, Jedi Survivor also shows us the reverse of this idea, giving us a very heroic moment for Cal before illustrating the toll that it's taken. After he beats Dagan Gera in a dramatic lightsaber duel and rescuing his friend, Cal gets this moment alone in an escape pod. The camera traps you there with him as he rattles and shakes, And for 30 seconds he isn't a warrior anymore. He's just a frightened child. The same child who held his master, his surrogate father, in his arms and cried as his life blew up behind him. The game is reminding us here not to objectify Cal in the same way that he objectifies himself. He might be an incredible fighter, a survivor in every sense of the word, but he is still that frightened child too. We can admire his actions, but we have to square ourselves with what Cal endured to make him the way that he is. And we have to remember that underneath all the heroics, he's still just a man. Many of the struggles that we face in the world today feel insurmountable. Climate change, the rising tide of fascism in Europe and America, wealth disparity, genocide. These problems are massive, and the solutions feel so out of reach of individuals. I think that's part of why today's cultural zeitgeist is less accommodating of traditional stories of heroism like Luke Skywalker's, because it's harder for us to buy them in light of the existential threats that we face. It's harder to imagine ourselves as a lone hero defeating a big villain while we're staring down climate change. Jedi Survivor and Andor are stories about the social and the human cost of positive change. I think enough of us understand, on a fundamental level, that our moment of victory over the challenges that we face today is uncertain. We intuitively get that there's going to need to be tough, collective work, sacrifice and cooperation to overcome these challenges. And that's why Cal's obsession with beating the Empire by himself resonated so strongly with me. Cal has to learn that he isn't enough alone. It's why Cassian's reluctance to get involved with a revolution, Luthen's monologue and Kino Loy's impassioned speech hit home the way that they do. We relate to the individual powerlessness of these characters, and we admire their bravery in the face of their relative smallness. The cost of their bravery is acknowledged frankly, and it feels true. Ultimately, Jedi Survivor is not a triumphant story for Cal in the way that Fallen Order was. That first game ends with Cal full of hope, ready to take the fight to the Empire. Jedi Survivor ends with a harrowing reminder of the cost of that fight, the price that Cal has paid to seed hope for the galaxy. Luthen and Cassian both understand this cost just as well, understand the cost of fanning the flames of revolution. Luthen makes his life a sunless space, sacrificing his decency and his honour for his cause. Cassian loses his home, his loved ones, and gives up on his childhood memories of family before he can commit to the rebellion. He has to lose everything before he can start to take any of it back. Starting a revolution is the last resort for Cassian, an act of self-harm for Luthen, and was a foregone conclusion for Cal, who entered into the fight as a child without a full understanding of what it might take from him. Their sacrifices and their hardships make their little victories feel all the more visceral, and their eventual heroic wins all the more inspiring. Their struggles feel congruous with each other and tangible. Rebellion makes the same demands of all of them. Fighting climate change and fascism and the rest isn't something that a lone hero is going to do for us. It's something that we have to band together to do, something that's going to take difficult decisions and sacrifice to manifest. Hope is on the horizon, and maybe one day a figurehead might emerge to strike the killing blow against the forces of darkness for us, but I think the stories that Star Wars is best equipped to tell now are tales of laying the groundwork, of collective action and commitment to a cause. Jedi Survivor and Andor are stories that acknowledge that, frankly, this shit isn't going to come easy, and there is a price to be paid for hope. Thanks for watching. Well guys, I've been talking about this video since I don't know how long, and it's finally done. It's not at all what I initially set out to do. I started off just writing a pretty straightforward review for Jedi Survivor, but that just spiraled completely out of control. It was like 6,000 words, and I had to draw a line somewhere. And I think it's more interesting to kind of compare and contrast between these similar stories than it is to just, drill down deeply on one game or one movie or whatever. I've got no idea what my next video is going to be. I've got a couple of scripts that I'm tossing around, but I haven't settled on one yet. Maybe I'll put it to a poll the same way I did with this one. So keep an eye out for that. Please do like, subscribe, share it. It helps the channel out a lot. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.